Hi, Wendy here. Today, I wanted to talk about communication. Now, communicating between co-parents can go easy or it can be difficult. If you've had an amicable divorce or separation, I'm fairly certain you can talk things out and you can work out issues. If you've had an acrimonious divorce, well, that can be a little different. So either you could sit down and work out the issues for your child and do a parenting plan up and who's going to get what time and work it out that way. Or you can let a judge decide, in which case neither of you get a say. Now, I've seen parenting time be issued if there is a stay-at-home mom. Likely you will have all week long. Every weekend will be with the non-stay-at-home parent. Now, I have my own issues with regard to that setup. And I really push for parents to make this decision because, frankly, it's not fair to have all weekends with one parent. It kind of gets tedious, but I am for stability for the child. Now, what do I mean? Weekends, you want to go places, you want to do things, you want to have a good time. And sometimes the parent that works every single week wants some downtime for themselves too. Perhaps one or both of you are dating. You know, if you want to go out with a boyfriend and you're not ready to introduce your child, think about it. And vice versa. You know, if you want to go out with the girlfriend, you don't want your child hanging around until you know that this person is somebody you want to introduce. Now, if you're one of those parents that keeps on introducing other people, that's a topic for another video. Anyhow, communicating is key to raising a child, and you don't always get what you want. And the way I put it to most of my clients is, if you were both living in the same house, what would you do? Yeah, some things are different now. For purposes of this video, we're going to talk about acrimonious. You're not able to talk to each other, whether it's one of you or both of you, regardless. Now, parent one will be the residence of the child, where most of the time is spent. Now, that parent has to provide all information to the other parent, because 9 times out of 10, it's considered a joint custody situation, in which case you both have access to the child and to any and all pertinent information. Pertinent information being doctors, dentists, schools, extracurricular activities, all of it. You are the facilitator of making sure that other parent has what they need. You give them all the doctor's numbers, the school's numbers, and things like that. They can set up what they have to set up with those entities. But as long as you've given them that information, you're golden. You should also tell them when the child has had an appointment or is having an appointment. I would suggest that you let them know that there's an upcoming appointment for the child. If there's an emergency, you are responsible to relay that to the other parent. And you both must stay respectable, civil, and provide for their child's comfort and well-being. One of my clients had a child with a broken arm. Now, the child broke his arm at school, and that night was supposed to be the father's night. And he was supposed to have the child for the weekend. The mother delayed calling the father. Now, this apparently happened at 7:30 in the morning. Now, the child broke his arm at school because the mother had nobody to watch the child until school started. So the child was dropped off at the school playground. The child fell, broke his arm. And then he was told later on. And then the mother pushed to the fact that while she had been there all day, they were going to alternate who's going to go in with the child. When the child was released, there was a big argument as to who was taking the child home. This occurred in front of the child. I cannot begin to tell you the look on that child's face. That child's not doing so good right now. He's all grown up, but he has a lot of issues. Because that's how his parents rolled. Let's not do this to our kids. When you communicate, stick to I. Now, personally, judge is going to determine what time is going to be spent where. You need to stick with it. Okay? You need to stick with that whole scenario. You don't have to say. Remember, you couldn't decide. I'm sorry, my dog is eating my blanket. Drop the quilt. Thank you. See? Now, my suggestion in an acrimonious situation is do not change the times. You go exactly letter for letter, word for word in what is in that order. If someone strays from it, then keep track of it. There does come a point when people have had enough. Yelling, screaming, ranting, raving, using the child to lash out is not the point you should be making. That is detrimental to your health and well-being, as well as the child's. That is what you have an attorney for. That is what there are courts for. Trying to get the flare off there. There you go. Now, you have your child every weekend. Things seem to be going smoothly. Parent number one, the primary residence parent, contacts you and says, I'd like to have the child this weekend. Well, let's be flexible for the child's sake. Do you have plans for the weekend? No. Let the child go. What is the big deal? You want that time returned to you? You're entitled. Legally, you are entitled, and a court will tell you you're entitled. So get that on that court order, that this time must be returned to you almost immediately. Like I said, this is not for you people that can work it out. Holidays, accesses, long weekends. By the way, a long weekend denotes that that child is with you. Whatever parent has the child for that weekend has that child for that time period too. It is part of the weekend. School's not there. Unless you have some other way of dealing with it and other work thing, that's fine. However you can work it out. Again, this is for the acrimonious people that can't get along. If you don't give a little to the other, don't expect to get a little from the other. In the same regard, if you keep on giving and getting no compensation in return, don't include your child. Just stop giving. You've given. This much time is owed you. That's it. Now let's talk about the child for a minute, because there seems to be some confusion with some parents that I find. That child doesn't get a say. Your child doesn't have a say as to whether or not it wants to go for access or not. That is your responsibility as the primary resident parent to push the child to go. That's what you signed up for. That's why you are getting most of the time. Because your claim is that you've been the caregiver 100% of the time, and you have the child's respect and attention. You don't get to say, hey, I don't want the child going over there. You have to make sure that child is there for their access on time. You don't get to issue orders of, you're going to pick up the child here, you're going to do this, and you're going to do that. When it's your time with that child, that's your parenting time. You are 100% responsible to do everything for that child. You certainly can reach out to the other parent and say, hey, I need little Bobby picked up from soccer practice on Tuesdays. Can you do that? And if they say no, you don't get to fall down and throw a hissy fit. You find somebody else to step in. Somebody else that can take the child. But you make sure your child's taken care of. You don't get to critique the other parent's parenting. You don't agree with something that's being done? Not your problem. You don't get to have a say. The other parent introduces somebody into the child's life. I would hope that that person is going to be in the child's life for the long haul and that they're not just introducing dates. Because as a parent, you're held to a higher level. Communication can't be about the other person. You stick to the communications that relate only to your child. If the child wasn't there, you wouldn't have to have communication. There would be none. But the child is there. Neither of you want to talk to the other one 9 times out of 10, or I'll say, well, maybe 7 times out of 10. Some parents are actually able to get along and have long-lasting friendships. The most contentious thing in communications has to do when there's another party involved. When your ex comes up with a new partner. Those that get along are able to say, hey, I've found somebody new. It's very serious. I would like for you to meet this person. And they meet. And they do it in a non-threatening way. And they're able to talk and say, hey, okay, how are you going to feel about my child? And, are you the good person that's going to be taking care of my child? And yada, yada, yada. In cases where that's not possible, you don't get a say. Unfortunately, you just don't get a say. No, my divorce pen was not even dried on the paper before my ex remarried. And my daughter was over his house and came home from that weekend telling me she was instructed to call his new wife Mom. I had a problem with that. And I asked to meet with her. And I was told no. Well, it turns out there's a long backstory. Obviously, if he married her that quickly, they were together a lot longer than our marriage was over. I didn't care. I wanted to know who was taking care of my child and that my child was going to be okay. That didn't happen. For the child's sake, I told her, you don't have to call her Mom. That's not your responsibility. If you want to call her Mom, that's up to you. My personal feelings would be that you call her something different than Mom, because I am Mom. And when I got somebody else in my life, I didn't force them to call him anything but his name. Okay? But that's me. My ex wanted to continue to be difficult, though. He didn't play by the rules, and he didn't play by what the court order said. In the end, it bit him. It bit him big time because we moved countries, and he wanted to fight. And the judge said there is no fight. She kept meticulous records. And I did. I kept every communication. I kept the access schedule, when he was there and took the access, when he didn't take the access, any things like doctors, that type of thing. I relayed to him any appointments. I relayed to him, she had a school play one time, and he didn't bother to turn up. And she was crushed. She was crushed. He promised that he would turn up, and the next day he told her, I kept her to myself and I wouldn't let him come. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't out of her sight after she got off the phone with him. I was busy videotaping her in this show. And I made it as good for her as I possibly could. And when she said she was very upset, Dad said he was going to be here, I said, well, I don't know what happened, and I'm sorry that he wasn't. So when he blamed me, it came down to a point where I produced her to a therapist for family therapy. She would go with me, she would have time alone, and she would go with her dad, and she'd have time alone. And I remember the therapist laying into me. Why did you include her when he wasn't coming for access? I said, because she was looking forward to access. So I showed her his emails where he said he couldn't, and I let her listen to messages where he said he couldn't come. So she knew it wasn't me. And yet he kept blaming me and saying I was stopping it. And the therapist said, I guess you have no choice but to put her in the middle. I said, I have no choice, period. She was already being put in the middle by being told I wasn't allowing it. So I wanted her to see it from her dad. I wanted her to hear it from her dad. Out of 1 year of every other weekend access, I added all the time he had spent with her for those hours, literally hours. And it was 4 days, over a year. The judge said, go. I'm not holding you here. No geographical limitations. Well, he was quite pissed. But I still went out of my way. Every time I came back to the States, I brought her with me and dropped her off with him. And he'd play games. One time, he held her for 3 hours past the agreed time that he was going to drop her off. I was pissed. And I thought about getting the cops involved, but that would be putting her in a very bad position. Communication is key. If you can't communicate, you stick to the court order. Don't alter it. Don't vary from it. If you want to take them on a vacation somewhere and that court order doesn't allow you any vacation time, you're screwed. Let it go. Not a thing you can do. You can attempt, but realize you have to remain flexible. And likely the answer is going to be, no, I'm not going to cooperate. Hang in there and stick to the subject. If you don't need to communicate with them, don't communicate. You get a diatribe of an email that's a page or two long, and all it's doing is battering you left, right, and center as to your abilities of parenting, calling you names, putting you down, and threats and promises. Look through it very carefully and say, what does this have to do with my child? What are they trying to ask about my child? There's nothing there. Don't respond. You will have your buttons pushed, but do not respond. Not to them, because then they know they have you. They still have your attention. They still have control of you. If they can piss you off, they got control. They're not worth your time. They're not worth your effort anymore. Change your buttons. It doesn't matter. You're divorced now. Doesn't matter what they're saying or doing. Your abilities as a parent will play out in time. If you don't put your child in the middle, that child's going to turn to you and know that you're the stable parent. You're the one they can trust. You're the one that's always going to be there. That your love doesn't have conditions. The other person is not feeling quite so confident. Now, I've been dealing with a narcissist in one of my clients. And he has a very hard time. And let me tell you, it's tough parenting. But in the end, his child knows that dad will always be there for him, that dad will never let him down, that dad has that safety net feature, and that he doesn't have to take care of his dad. His dad's not feeble. His dad's strong. But he feels beholden to his mother, who is weak, who cannot make it alone, who has nobody in her life, who makes him feel like he's the only person she has. And he probably is the only person that she has, rather. And that's sad. That's sad. Communicate. Keep it clear. Keep it concise. Keep it civil. Keep it brief. And if the answer is no, you're not going to get what you want, say shrug your shoulders, say thank you, and file it. And hold on to it until you've had enough. Take care.